Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the life and legacy of a man who literally revolutionized his sport. Today, we are exploring the king of spin himself, Shane Warne. We'll be looking at exactly how he took an almost forgotten art form and used it to completely dominate global cricket for a decade and a half.
But before we get into all the staggering statistics, I want you to think about this for a second. Could a player who never scored a single century and was once outright fired from his local Australian rules football club be named one of the 5 greatest cricketers of the entire 20th century? I mean, it sounds like an impossible trajectory, doesn't it? How does a kid whose primary sporting dream was completely shattered rise to such unbelievable historic heights in an entirely different arena? Well, that is exactly the journey we're going to map out today.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with his background, break down the art of leg spin, map out his timeline of dominance, navigate the controversies, hear from the experts, and then distill his massive legacy into 5 key points.
Section 1. The hook and background.
When we look at the timeline of his breakout, 1992 was, well, let's just say it was a brutal introduction. He made his test debut for Australia against India in Sydney and took 1 wicket for 150 runs. He was a struggling, unsure debutant. But look at how rapidly things shifted. Literally just 1 year later, in 1993, he bowls the famous Ball of the Century, instantly cementing his status as a global icon. He'd go on to retire from Test cricket in 2007 and then seamlessly transition into captaining and coaching in the IPL in 2008.
Let's zoom in a little closer on that early period, because it wasn't easy. Warne actually received a letter from the St. Kilda Football Club basically stating his services were no longer required. His AFL dreams were completely shattered. So he went to England to play club cricket, and get this, his weight ballooned from 79 kilos to 99 kilos in just 6 months. By the time he made that really tough 1992 debut taking 1 for 150, he seriously doubted if he was even good enough for Test cricket. It was actually the unwavering support of his family, his mom, dad, and brother, that kept him pushing forward when his self-esteem had hit rock bottom.
Moving on to Section 2. The art of leg spin.
Now, for those who might not know the absolute intricacies, leg spin is an incredibly difficult delivery bowled with finger and wrist spin that breaks unexpectedly off the pitch. Before Warne rose to fame in the early 90s, cricket was totally dominated by fearsome fast bowlers, guys like Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, and Ian Bishop. Leg spin was considered a dying art. It was almost a relic. But Warne brought this massive style quotient to slow bowling. With his famous slow walk up to the crease and that ripping wind-up action, he single-handedly revitalized it. Suddenly, you had every young kid in the backyard trying to bowl leg spin.
And he wasn't just spinning the ball. He was an absolute master of variation. First, he had that massive turning leg break that drifted in and just ripped off the pitch. Second, a highly disguised top spinner. Third, the lethal flipper that slid on quickly and stayed low, a delivery that absolutely tormented batsmen. Just ask South Africa's Daryl Cullinan. And fourth, under the guidance of coach Bob Simpson, he developed these incredibly aggressive around-the-wicket angles. But the real secret sauce here is his accuracy. Generating tremendous spin is one thing, but Warne had this pinpoint, relentless accuracy which is incredibly rare for wrist spinners to conquer.
Section 3. A timeline of dominance.
708.
Just let that number sink in for a second. Shane Warne was the very first bowler in the entire history of Test cricket to break the 600-wicket barrier, and then he just kept going and became the first to break the 700-wicket barrier. He famously claimed that 700th wicket at his home ground, the mighty Melbourne Cricket Ground, on Boxing Day in 2006, bowling England's Andrew Strauss.
And alongside those 708 Test wickets, he captured 293 one-day international wickets. That brings his staggering total to 1,001 international wickets. Think about that. He is one of only 2 bowlers in the entire history of the sport to cross that mythical 1,000-wicket threshold.
But you know, stats really only tell half the story. We absolutely have to talk about the delivery that changed everything. The ball of the century. The stage was set on June 4th, 1993 at Old Trafford in Manchester. Warne was bowling his very first ball ever in an Ashes test in England. He sends down a delivery to Mike Gatting, who, by the way, was one of the best players of spin in the world at the time, and it drifts way outside leg stump. Gatting barely plated it, but the ball violently gripped the pitch and spun all the way across to clip the top of the off stump. It literally sent a tremor through the psyche of English cricket that lasted for over a decade. That was the exact moment Shane Warne the cricketer became Shane Warne the legend. From there, the accomplishments just kept stacking up like a massive highlight reel. He was the absolute hero of the 1999 World Cup, winning man of the match in both the semifinal against South Africa and the final against Pakistan. He took a famous Ashes hat trick in Melbourne in 1994. He was also a highly capable lower-order batter, scoring 3,154 test runs. Fun fact, that is the most runs by any player in history without ever scoring a century. He actually famously got out for 99 against New Zealand. And later in his career, he went over to the IPL in 2008 as captain and coach of the underdog Rajasthan Royals and led them straight to the championship.
Section 4. Navigating the controversies.
Now, off the field, things were definitely complex. In 1994, he and Mark Wall were fined for naively providing pitch and weather information to a man who, well, turned out to be a bookmaker. However, in that exact same year, Pakistan's Salim Malik offered Warne $200,000 to bowl poorly and essentially throw a match. Warne immediately rejected the bribe and reported it straight to his captain. Then, jumping to 2003, right before the World Cup, he received a 12-month ban after testing positive for a diuretic, which he claimed his mother gave him for weight loss. And we can't forget the bizarre 1999 Joe the Cameraman incident, where a teammate was sledged on a live microphone. Warne was heavily accused by the media, even though the cameraman eventually admitted to saying it himself.
So, what you should really take away from all this off-field drama is Warne's staggering ability to compartmentalize. Despite intense, sometimes suffocating media scrutiny and deep personal struggles, like the breakdown of his marriage right before the famous 2005 Ashes, he never ever let it destroy his on-field performance. In fact, during that incredibly tough 2005 Ashes series, he bowled brilliantly, taking 40 wickets. He actually finished that calendar year with 96 test wickets, shattering a 24-year-old record. He had this unique ability to absorb insane amounts of pressure and channel it directly into his bowling.
Section 5. Praise from the experts. Less than a decade after his debut, in the year 2000, a panel of elite cricket experts named him one of the 5 Wisden cricketers of the century. He was the only active player on the entire list. He was placed shoulder to shoulder with absolute immortals of the game like Sir Donald Bradman, Sir Garfield Sobers, Jack Hobbs, and Sir Viv Richards. That alone tells you the sheer magnitude of the impact he had made in such a relatively short amount of time. But he didn't get there entirely alone, of course. Warne was deeply shaped by his mentor, Terry Jenner, who pushed him to get fit and truly learn the deep history of Test cricket. Coach Bob Simpson helped him develop those deadly tactical angles we talked about earlier. Because of this tutelage and his own inherently brilliant cricket mind, modern scholars revere his strategic mastery. In fact, even though he only officially captained a handful of one-day games for his country, he is widely regarded by experts today as the greatest captain the Australian Test team never had.
Section 6. 5 Points of Greatness. Let's distill this massive legacy down into 5 key pillars. 1. He single-handedly revived the dying art of leg spin, bringing it right back to the forefront of a game that was totally dominated by fast bowlers. 2. He reached an unprecedented 1,001 international wickets across Tests and ODIs. 3. He possessed an unmatched tactical mind and psychological mastery over his opponents, basically creating doubt and pressure every single time he held the ball. 4. He was incredibly athletic, making him an exceptional slip fielder with over 100 catches and a vital lower-order run score. And 5. He had an enduring charisma and showmanship that brought incredible entertainment value and captivated global audiences for decades.
Sadly, as many of you know, on March 4, 2022, Shane Warne tragically passed away from a suspected heart attack while vacationing in Thailand. He was only 52 years old. His sudden death resulted in an immense, global outpouring of grief from fans and former rivals alike. In his hometown of Melbourne, the MCG honored his monumental impact by permanently renaming the massive Great Southern Stand to the Shane Warne Stand, cementing his legacy in the city he loved.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. Warne always championed the ultimate challenge of Test cricket over the shorter formats. So how does Shane Warne's revitalization of an almost forgotten art form, leg spin, ensure the continuing survival and magic of Test cricket for future generations? It's a fascinating question about how one single maverick player can permanently alter the DNA of a sport. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And as always, keep learning.